Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar about our digital collections and how we created them. Today, we have three panelists who will make short presentations about their collections with some information, and we'll follow up with a few questions. This webinar was born with Lucy Hall, who shared her recent curation of a digital collection for the Medical Mission Sisters. And we'll branch out to include other people who have done other digital collections. So let's start with Lucy. Lucy Hall is the archivist for the North American branch of the Medical Mission Sisters. This is Lucy's first full-time archives position since receiving an MS in library science from Drexel University in 2021. Previously, Lucy has interned in the archives of Chateau Vaux-le-Vicomte and volunteered with the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So take it away, Lucy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. So I guess I'm just gonna jump right in. Can I share my screen? Yes, great. Let's see. Okay. So this is, as some of you, I think most of you have seen, sorry, getting distracted by the Zoom controls. So about a year and a half ago, I had been working on some of the PR records for the Medical Mission Sisters, and I discovered a treasure trove of, let's see, 300 some issues of the Medical Missionary magazine, which is a magazine published by the sisters from 1927 to 1970 that was about making the cause known and, combination of updates, what was going on, and interest pieces about work in the missions. Not all of it was directly about the work of the Medical Mission Sisters. Sometimes they would feature articles from other communities or about other communities' hospitals, especially in the early days. And I also found a note about how these magazine issues were considered the best source of society history, especially for external researchers. And I also, when I was looking through them, I was really struck by how fun the graphic design is and how interesting I found it to look through these issues. And I thought it would be really great if more people could see them more easily. So I made a proposal to my leadership team to digitize all the issues and then upload them here to the Internet Archive, which is, if you're unaware, a not-for-profit organization that both archives, websites, and the internet in general. And you could also has a library function where you can read, you can upload scans of books, and you can also read them. I chose Internet Archive because I was already familiar with it, and also because it required no, it required no financial or technical contributions on our end. We as long as I could get the magazine scanned in sorry, as long as I get all I had to do was scan the magazines and then upload to the Internet Archive. They host it for free. They have their own backups and everything. So it was a very easy, worry-free setup for me and for my society. And even so, it is a public domain. These magazines will now be publicly available for free to anybody. They can be downloaded and used. But since they are published magazines that are floating around, it wasn't really an issue for my community in terms of legal or like privacy rights. So I wouldn't necessarily upload. I would not digitize just anything and put it on the Internet Archive. But since these were already publicly available magazine issues, it didn't feel like an issue. And I do know, for example, that I think the Mary Knoll College has already uploaded some of our magazines onto the Internet Archive. I think they were going through their microfiche collection. So I would not suggest doing this for everything, but for magazines, it was great. The base and this way, researchers can find it way more easily. Even sisters who don't have access to hard copies, you can just share a link. I've already had 2 researchers tell me that they have used this independently, like before they even contacted me. The workflow itself was pretty simple. It just was a lot of time. I would just scan in a magazine page by page, and then I have a quick, oh, sorry. So I would do a master copy, put it into Adobe, and then I crop everything. And this wasn't necessary, but I chose to have each page be so it was a little complicated because because the size and format of the magazine changed over the years. But generally what would happen was that I or one of the administrative assistants who helped me would scan in the 2-page spread, and then we would crop each page individually, because that way in Internet Archive, you can have it do a page flip, so it feels like you're reading an actual magazine. And then I had a standard boilerplate intro, as well as basic metadata. Probably the most complicated part was I did put in a bit of a content warning, because the articles were from 1920s, 1930s, and sometimes there were things that would not fly today. So I wanted to put in a boilerplate warning about that. And then there was a handful of times where I had to put a specific warning in for an article that had like pretty racist views. So that is my project.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. And we'll hear more from her when we do the Q&A. Our next presenter is Casey Bowser. She is the archivist for the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill and the University Archivist for Seton Hill University. She currently serves on several committees for ACWR. Additionally, Casey is a member of the Mission and Heritage Committee for the National Shrine of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and assists the Council on Library and Information Services as a grant reviewer. She earned her BA in History and Public History at St. Vincent College and an MA in Museum Studies from Johns Hopkins University. Casey earned certified archivist credentials in 2019. Prior to her work in archives, Casey worked at the Westmoreland Museum of American Art in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Casey?
Thank you so much, Sister Grace Marie, and thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Lucy, for sharing your cool project. I was super excited to see it on the listserv, and I hope to use the Internet Archive for some future collections work, so this is great. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully all of you can see. I'm going to share a couple of digital collections projects that I've been involved in in various formats, so you guys can get a sense of what we've done. This very first project is for the Sisters of Charity of Seton Hill. This is basically our digital collections and digital exhibits website. And so most of the projects that we've done and included digitally in some way have been ongoing projects. So it's like we've never spent the time necessarily to upload content that is not already project-based. So, it's because either a research request or an anniversary has come up and we've had to scan materials or do some research. That's part of the reason that we've done this. We tried not to create extra work for ourselves if we can't. And so this is some of what we've been able to do. So 2 of our early superiors, we've digitized some of their personal papers. Most of these are more personal writings. A lot of the writings we have are more business related. We have a lot of those, but these are some of the more personal writings. As you can see, This is an Omeka-based website. And that's not very clear. I guess I'll clarify that. This is an Omeka-based website, and Omeka is an open source platform that you can either use a free version or a paid version, relatively low cost paid version that you can customize to some extent. And so this is an Omeka-based system. And so we were able to digitize these letters. This is sort of the metadata. They use Dublin Core, and you're also able to select what metadata you want to use. So we've been fairly limited in the metadata that we use within this, but you can open up the letter and zoom and download it even if you want. And then we also, for many of them, have a transcript because as we talked about in another ACWR meeting, not everyone can read cursive writing these days. So we try to include a transcript if we can. So these are some of the letters that we've uploaded for our superiors. And then I'll also share several other things. We've had some images of artwork. So one sister in particular, we have a number of great photos of her art that we were already digitizing. And so we wanted to include them in the site to share a little bit more about her work. You can click on the photo. You have some metadata on the right. Again, very limited in our metadata that we're providing, trying not to cause more work for ourselves. But this is just one way we've been able to share digital collections. Another way that you can utilize Omeka is, and if I can reach it because the Zoom thing is moving my screen here. We also have exhibits that we've done. And I will say Sister Spotlights was a grant funded project through the Council on Library and Information Resources. We received a grant from them, I believe it was 2018 or 2019, that we received a grant to digitize or digitally reformat cassette tape interviews of some of our sisters. We have a very large oral history collection of over 700 tapes. The grant did not fund all of the digital reformatting for all 700, but we did a selection. And from there, we were required as part of that grant to, at the very least, make the metadata available publicly, but if we could, make the interviews available. So what we had done at this time, again, this was 2018, 2019, we uploaded an image and interviews for those sisters as part of that project. And so I can just click on one here. For each one, we have a photo of the sister, a very brief biography that we created. We had interns create, and then links to the actual oral history. So you're able to play them. They're in 30-minute chunks because the cassette tapes were 30 minutes and each of the recordings that we have are 30 minutes. And additionally, Omeka has a limit in terms of file size. So you have to be careful, you know, if you're digitizing at high resolution, for example, your file might be very large. But for Omeka, if you're going to curate a collection or provide some digital content, sometimes you have to lower the size or make it a JPEG just so you can make it available on here. We also have transcripts for many of them as well, many of the interviews. So you're able to upload everything from audio files, PDFs, image files, JPEGs, TIFFs. It's just the size of the content that matters. So we've got a number of interviews available this way. And we've had great success with this project. All of our oral histories had release forms, which gave us permission to make this content available. Additionally, we went sort of through a QA or a QC process, quality control process. We reviewed the transcripts or the recordings in advance to make sure that everything was as it should be. And I will say the one trouble we had with this project was more so in the quality of the original recordings. There were some recordings that were digitally reformatted that were not able to be uploaded just because the sound quality was not good to begin with. And then when they reformatted it, it was even worse. So what we were able to do is just let people know we have this tape. We might have a transcript that's decent, but it's a very poor quality recording. So that was really one of the challenges we had with that project. We've also had students do projects, digital curated exhibits. This was one about our first foreign mission, which was in Korea, and we have Korean sisters. And so she really, we had an intern who really took it upon herself to sort of lay out the history of our community's time in Korea. She included, of course, photographs, images. There's some oral history clips, not full oral histories, but some clips, excerpts of records. So there's all kinds of information she included here. And she even brought it up to sort of contemporary time. Let's see if I can show you with some contemporary photos. There was a video we were able to put here as well. I won't show you all that today. You can take a look if you'd like another time, but we were able to put this together. So like contemporary photos and some interviews with some sisters who had been in Korea. So lots of different ways that you can utilize Omeka, obviously to share collections, to do digital exhibits. We also can post finding aids. We only have a couple on here now, but we've got some specific collections that we've highlighted here and include a link to a finding aid. It basically opens up a PDF of the finding aid. And so this is one way we can share more information about our collections to potential researchers, etc. So that is our Sister of Charity of Seton Hill collection. Let me switch to the Federation. Can everyone see the Federation website? Yes. Okay. Our Sisters of Charity Federation, which includes a number of communities who trace their roots to St. Elizabeth Ann Seton or St. Vincent de Paul, Vincentian Setonian communities. We get together rather frequently, and we've worked together on several projects. And so when we decided to, over COVID, do a digital project together, it turned out very successful. So we also used an Omeka-based site for this. We have our own URL. It is a paid site. We pay about $100 a year, which is not bad. We have this sort of introductory text, but what I want to show you are two things. We've done several projects. One of them was oral history based, and we all contributed a selection of oral histories from our collections. And so we created this project called Charity Speaks, and then divided these oral histories up into these subjects, subcategories. And each of us contributed a photo, a very brief description, and either a transcript or an actual recording of the oral history. And so this was a great way for us to look as a federation and look at our charism and see, like, where do we have similarities? How do we connect? But also where are there differences too? And so each of these subsections has maybe 2 or 3 sort of highlighted or featured oral histories from the various communities. And then some other ones you can link to or click on and find out more. This was a really fun project. Veronica worked with me on it as well and can speak to it. But I think it really highlighted the value of our archives to our leadership, the Federation leadership and our individual leadership. And I think it brought us closer as a group in talking about what kinds of projects that we can do together. Since that time, we've done several other. We did a history of the Federation in objects, and you can see each of the communities wrote a short history and then also selected 2 objects to highlight from their collections with a very brief description. So again, this is as simple as a photo and a description. On the back end, you can find the metadata, right? But most people who are visiting these sites aren't necessarily as interested in the metadata. They're interested in seeing the stuff or the archives or the oral histories. And so each of us contributed in this way to the project. So this was really fun as well. We were able to share and highlight our collections, and especially for those archivists who don't have a digital presence, this was a great way for them to kind of dip their toes into this world. And for us to do it in a collaborative way that's not totally overwhelming. Veronica, yeah, you wanted to.
Well, could you show the map? Because that's one of my favorite parts of this.
Yeah. So one thing we could include too was this interactive map where it highlights the different charity communities. So like, here's my community, the Sisters of Charity Seton Hill Mother House. And then you can see where some of the others are. Obviously, these represent all the different Federation communities. And their mother houses or their locations. So that's a really fun feature of this as well. I'll say with Omeka, there's a lot of back-end learning that you have to take on. I don't necessarily use Omeka every day, but we use it project-based. And what I find often is that I have to kind of reteach myself how to do it every time, which takes a little bit of time, but isn't terrible. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, Omeka is somewhat easy to use, and there's a way you can customize it and make it a little flexible too. The nice thing about Omeka, you can create tags, you can create collections. And so you can see everything that each of our Federation communities have offered through this site. You know, you can click there and find all their quote unquote collection items. So in this case, Leavenworth was mostly oral histories. But any one of us who have contributed in different ways, everything comes up. So these are the oral histories, and then our artwork that we had included, etc. So I think, you know, our Federation is looking at new ideas, how we can work with this and incorporate this in our ongoing collaborations. We've got some exciting things coming up. So there's always ideas about how we can work together, and that's really fun and exciting. And I don't want to take up too much time, but the last one I want to show you, I also work for our university archive, which is the sister-sponsored university. And I just want to share that if any of you have utilized Google Suite, like if your employer or your organization uses Google email or has like the Google Workspace, you are able to create Google sites, Google websites for free. And what's really nice is that they are totally customizable. So similar to creating like a blog or just a website, you're able to do this. And so we've done this with our university archive. And obviously this is sort of an informational website, but one thing we've started to do, because we don't have, again, a collections management system or any other kind of platform, is share digitized collections. And it is incredibly easy to do. If you have uploaded anything to your Google Drive and you want to include it on the site, that it is totally possible. We've included videos, I mean, up to 30 minutes in length, also oral histories, other kinds of video content. We're currently updating content, but this isn't, I would say, ideal, but it works in a pinch. And so we're using it for that purpose. Right now, we're in the process of digitizing newspaper clippings. And so when you click these little links, basically what opens up is either a Google Drive folder or an actual PDF. You can link to an actual PDF within your Google Drive. And so is it my favorite? No, but it's working for us, and it's working for us now. So you're able to link out to other collections, which we've done, or other projects. We just had a student do a project on the Black student experience at our university. And so this was a totally student curated website based on Google Sites. And she has provided documents with some descriptions, interviews, clips with transcripts, some photo galleries as well. So this is all a great way with relatively little effort to share any kinds of digital exhibits or collections. And it's really quite functional, and it's free. It's free. So if you have Google Suite or Workspace, it's just one of the Google options, like app options, when you're on Google, and you can create this. So I wanted to share that as an option as well. So I will let Veronica go. Thank you.
Okay, so I will introduce Veronica, who I think needs no introduction. Veronica Buchanan currently serves as the archivist for the Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio. She is also the executive secretary for ACWR and is project director for its NHPRC Collaborative Archives grant this year regarding Catholic Native boarding school collections. Prior to serving with the Sisters of Charity, she was an archivist in a special collections entity at the University of Cincinnati.
Well, I'll jump right into it. I did create a PowerPoint for this, and I'm so glad Casey was able to share a bit broader some things that you can do on a collaborative effort with digital collections. But for my project, I kind of took the prompt and really focused on what we've done with digital collections with the Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati. So just some general questions I thought might come up with our audience is like, where do you start? And as Lucy shared, one of the main things, if you're considering a digital collection that's going to be publicly available, anything that really was meant for a public audience, like publications, yearbooks, those sorts of things that might already even be in the public domain. So that's generally where we started with our digital projects, but we did add photographs because in the case of our community, we don't charge for use of images. We just ask that they be cited correctly if they're going to be used in a publication or, any kind of special project, which is all noted in the item records. And then we did move on to include some obsolete AV formats down the road, just more for preservation long term, because otherwise these weren't going to be accessible in the very short term. So. And the last was we did have some grants who were very focused on getting more primary source records related to sisters. So that took a little bit more research, thought, and discernment within our archives team with sisters to see what would be suitable to share in a public sphere. So as Casey shared, this could be a grant project. So things that you could consider, your state, region, or local historical society could offer grants that may be helpful to at least cover the cost for digitization, or maybe the overall cost, including some of your time or an intern. There are grant opportunities on the national level with the Council of Library and Information Resources, especially their recordings at risk and digitizing hidden and special collections, which has a focus now for marginalized or hidden voices. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's offered, the recordings at risk, I think, are twice a year, and the digitizing hidden collections is once a year. And most of those, they run in the spring or the summer for their application rounds. And if those aren't available, if your community has a development office or some sort of foundation aspect, that potentially there could be either an existing grant that could correlate, like we did one with our sponsored university to help digitize some of their photographs and yearbooks for their upcoming 100th anniversary. So that was one that was in our, what we call the Sister Elise grant, that sisters can put towards any of our sponsored ministries each year. And then of course, if grant funding isn't available, just consider looking into the costs and putting it in your next fiscal year budget, because sometimes these can be pretty reasonable. I mean, most of the ones we've done on an annual basis are typically $3,000 to $5,000. Some of the ones a bit recently have been more like in the 8,000 range, but we literally digitize like 20,000 photos. So I mean, that's a little bit of a bigger project than the ones I'll be sharing today. So and what equipment could you need? So if you're considering an in-house project, definitely look at the kinds of material that you're going to want to scan, and then see what scanner options would make the most sense. So there's overhead scanners, there's sheet fed scanners, and then there's the traditional flatbed, some that are a bit larger if you have larger items. So just kind of see what makes the most sense, and also the cost, and then kind of compare that to if you want to pursue working with a vendor. So the two that we've worked with the most are the Crowley Company based in Frederick, Maryland. They are one of just a handful of companies in the country that can digitize microfiche cards. So kind of like microfilm on an index cards that we had in our collection. But they work with a very renowned German scanning company. I think they're like their dealer in the United States. So they have a lot of very specific equipment for like more obsolete formats. And then Scene Savers here in Covington, Kentucky, they're also nationally renowned for their work with obsolete AV materials. So audio reels, U-matic tape, 16 millimeter film. Those are ones we've done more recently with them. And then as Lucy and Casey have shared, the Internet Archive is a place where you can post digital content that doesn't really have a cost associated. You could also look at creating a website like Omeka that Casey shared. What I'll be sharing today, we've partnered with our State Historical Society, Ohio History Connection, who they have a digital repository called Ohio Memory. And for $250 a year, they do all the uploading, and then we just have to do the metadata. So that's been a really phenomenal time savings just compared to other projects I've done on the university level prior to this job. So that's one, and also as I shared and Casey shared too, maybe looking at your local universities, or if you have a sponsored university, there might be a collaborative project you could do within their web system. And then I've included some examples of some other communities who have used like software. I want to say Canto with the Loretto community. I think we've got somebody in the group here from there, so they can talk a bit more. But they've done an amazing job digitizing primarily photos from their collection. And then the Wheaton Franciscans used Catalog It. Their archivist, Kevin Korst, has been putting up just a brief selection of things now, but he's hoping to expand that more. So with grants, the main thing when you're writing the application is really look at what the prompt is for whatever you're looking at on the state or national level, and just making sure you're answering that why. So in a lot of cases with any of our collections, really emphasize the importance of these materials will demonstrate for women's history in the country, and also shedding light on community services, education, healthcare. Those are kind of the main core themes that I usually utilize in some way through any of our grant applications. So we've answered all the big questions. Now, we've got to get to the metadata. So a lot of folks have shared about the metadata today, but I just thought I'd show you kind of the behind the scenes look of what it looks like, at least for our content DM based Ohio memory site that we contribute to. And a lot of it, I would think it's pretty general, the kinds of fields that you'd be completing. So I highlighted 3 that would really be definite ones that you'd want to look at researching in advance. And that would be looking into indexing or search terms using the Library of Congress's authorities file to see if there's either name authorities or subject headings that you'd want to include. A description of whatever the record is, as well as maybe some context in terms of the history of the community and the institution, if it's connected with an institution. And then, of course, the date. If you can figure out a date, now that's not always optimal, but sometimes you can do a circa date. But those are the main ones. You'll see there's quite a few other ones that they include, but I just highlighted those. Those are ones you'd want to do some research in advance. So this is kind of what it looks like. I had to break it down because it was too big on the PowerPoint, but this is the top of a sample record for, we digitized the entire film collection of a community that joined with us in 2004, the Vincentian Sisters of Charity of Bedford, Ohio. And so this was a parade film from their Slovak Ladies Union. And then here's all that metadata in the background, how it looks on the website. And just to share too, if you are considering a grant project, of course, there's the added time involved with typically completing at least 2 reports. There's usually an interim report that's required, as well as a final report summarizing the project's process and accomplishments. And yeah, they are very time consuming, but it's really, that's probably like the main, other than putting the application together initially, kind of the only other time related cost for pursuing a grant. So it's really worth doing, especially once you get a template in place. Even if you're pursuing other grants, once you start to have some of that text, you find that you can plug it in, and it just takes less time as you pursue other opportunities. And then, yep, a big part of, especially again, if you're looking at grant projects, that always want to know how you're promoting the project, how you're getting the word out about what you're sharing to scholars, researchers, and beyond. So the main avenues that we've kind of looked at is our community has social media pages. At this time for this grant, it was Facebook and Instagram. They might be on some other sites by now, but they did some posts through the communities page about this film collection becoming available. And then of course, our ACWR newsletter is another great resource to share about any digital projects. And then finally, also make sure you have some internal presentation or program to share with the sisters and associates if you have those for your community. With these films, we did a special kind of film premiere and showed some clips from the various films with our both sisters and former Vincentian sisters as well. So they were able to kind of see their history, which they probably hadn't for over 50 years. So that was really exciting for them, especially. And so this is an example of the newsletter article we put together for the ACWR newsletter. And then as Casey shared quite a bit with much better visuals, definitely don't be afraid to bring in an intern or volunteer for a digital project. There's a lot of opportunities, as she shared so much more eloquently, to bring in an education component to it, to really see your collection in a different light. And it just, hold on, this got stuck. There we go. So I was sharing more on a basic level. Like we actually, we used to have high school students from one of our sponsored DePaul Cristo Rey Network schools where they have a work study program component. And this was actually during COVID. So this student actually never physically came to our archives, but I was able to put a collection of newsletters that we had to create individual records for that were very simple. It's like, here's the title, and basically all you have to add is the date. And then everything else is just copy, paste. So I just created a Word document with all of this information, like for this field, you paste this, and I even put a picture so you can see what it looks like. And we were able to have the student complete about a quarter, I'd say, of the overall collection, which was pretty strong because there were like 800 issues. So for a work study student 1 day a week, that was a pretty good number. And as we've all kind of shared, digital projects foster more sharing and accessibility of collections. And that's really what you'd want to think about the most, because I know there are some concerns, especially with photographs. I've had quite a talk with a lot of the sisters that I work with in archives who are concerned about that piece. But, we don't charge anything, and now we're getting the word out about this collection and the kinds of things that are housed in women religious archives, and people are just endlessly thankful, especially for, like I said, we've been doing larger photo scanning projects across the country. We've been hearing from people, so just something to consider there. And then also, as Casey shared, with digital collections, if you're putting together in a repository space, you can also link to other online content related to your collection. So in the case of our photograph collections or some of our manuscripts, if they were related to an institution, I can link to the finding aid for the actual archival collection. So you'll see that there, it's highlighted there for the photograph collection from Saints Cyril and Methodius School in Warren, Ohio, for the Vincentian sisters. Oh, yes. So I think I shared a bit earlier about what to consider if you're digitizing sharing manuscripts. For us, we really focused on very significant ones. So we had some journals from sisters who served in the Civil War, and we digitized all of those. We had, and I'll share here, a sister who traveled to Santa Fe in our pioneer group in 1865, and then wrote a reflection about that journey about 40 or 50 years later. And that's the journal here for Sister Catherine Mallon. I definitely recommend, if you are doing anything with handwritten material, just as Casey shared, not a lot of people can read well, not a lot, but some people can't read cursive at this time. So if you have a typed transcript, be sure to add that to the collection, because in a lot of cases, like with Content DM, once you upload these documents, they have something in their system that automatically recognizes the characters, and they populate the transcript. So we don't really have to do any of that work. We did have patient ledger for patients who were treated from the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War. And we had a sister go through and actually hand transcribe that, all the different pages. But that's about the only time that we've taken that extra step of putting in the transcript for handwritten material. And then also, so if you have, there was a really excellent academic article that was written about Sister Catherine Mallon's journal in the 70s. And so I was able to include a link of that in the description, and that's publicly available. So, they don't have to worry about being, part of a database or something. And I think that might be, yep, that's it. That's the end.
Well, thank you, Veronica. Thank you, everyone. While we've been sharing, people have been sending in questions. So I think I will begin with your questions. The first one I see is for Lucy. Was there the option to allow the Internet Archive to do the scanning? And if so, why did you not choose to have them do it for you?
That is a great question. If I remember correctly, I believe I think you can partner with them. Actually, if you give me a moment, I can look it up right now.
I know the Internet Archive has definitely done it for large book collections. Like there have been organizations that have asked them to digitize like their entire library, for example, and made those books available. I don't know specifics related to archival materials.
Yeah, I think Casey is right. It is not the standard way that they operate, and it would involve it was just I think is logistically a bit more complicated because we'd have to send it to them or send it somewhere else, and then that would also probably involve paying for it. And honestly, it was easy enough to do on my own time, like on free time during like in between other projects. I would just use we had one of those office copy printer machines, and that scans to a really high quality, so I just use that. And it was also by the first major project I proposed after getting this job, and the first time they had really done anything like this, so it was easier just to say, this is a very simple thing we can do in-house. I can do it in my spare time. If someone needs an extra project to work on, they can do it. So it was simpler to do it by ourselves. And I also enjoyed it. It was fun for me to look at all the pages and stuff. So that was basically why that's why I did not outsource it.
Okay, thank you. And the next question I see in the chat is for Casey. I think this was before you showed us the university ones. Is this a WordPress site, or what platform are you using? Was it custom built?
Sure. So the first two that I showed you were all Omeka based. So it is a paid Omeka subscription where you can create your own URL. You're also able to select or download different templates to make it look different, depending on how you want to present either your digitized collections or your exhibits. So that's what the first two were. The university site it functions very similar to a WordPress site, but it is Google Sites. So again, if you have Google-based email or Google Suites or Workspace, there's different kind of versions that you can get as an institution. It is included as part of the apps that are available to you. There are lots of different Google apps. And it's just like if you log into Gmail and you look at the little apps that are available, it's just called Sites. And you can, again, select a template. You can change the colors. You can add content to your heart's desire as long as you have space within a Google Drive. It does not necessarily have a limit in terms of the size of the file that you can upload, and you can play with it a little bit. So that's what that's based on.
Okay. And we have a follow-up for Casey, which is, which version of Omega? Was it Classic or S?
Yeah, I think both of them. Well, let me just verify. I believe it is Omeka. It is not Omeka.net. So Omeka.net is the totally free version, and that's a great. Omeka.net is a way that you don't have to necessarily have anything that you deal with on the back end. It's free, and it's a great way to experiment with Omeka. I believe the one that we're using in both cases is Omeka Classic, and that does require, I will say, a little bit more knowledge. You don't necessarily have to know coding, but you have to know enough about how it works to make changes and adjustments, significant changes and adjustments. And Omeka is also plugin based, which I don't know how to describe plugins, but it's sort of like you download a plugin to have different features within Omeka. So that map, somebody had asked about the map in my chat, like that map feature, I'm fairly certain was a plugin. So we were able to say like, there's different plugins if you want to do different things. And I think they have all kinds. Like one of them, we did not use this because I will be frank, I had trouble implementing it properly. But the oral history metadata synchronizer is a plugin for Omeka. I think it was developed by the University of Kentucky. It basically does transcription, like it allows you to index oral histories and do basic transcriptions when you include oral histories on Omeka. So that's another plugin. There's all kinds of plugins that make it flexible and adjustable. So, but you have to know a little bit about that. I will say, again, it's for many people, it's a learning curve. We have had someone in our federation, Mindy, I don't think she's on the meeting, but Mindy Gordon, who didn't know anything about Omeka and was really nervous about it, but has come to learn it. And she like occasionally has questions, but she can now, so she's mastered it to an extent. So that's really encouraging. Yes, that's correct. Omeka.org versus Omeka.net. Those are the two options.
Interesting. And this is also for Casey. Who did the digital reformatting of the audio? I believe this is with the oral histories.
Mm-hmm. So we sent ours to the NEDCC. So that's the New England Document Conservation Center. We had applied to CLEAR, the Council on Library and Information Resources Recordings at Risk grant. That is still an active program. They give up to, I believe, $50,000 for recordings at risk. But if you can make the case that your recording, like if your recordings are on cassettes or even older media, your recordings are at risk because those media forms don't last that long. And so they give grants of up to $50,000. So we did, I don't remember exactly how many physical tapes. It was 100 interviews with 100 sisters, but it was a lot more tapes. But we got a $30,000 grant that did those 100 interviews. And we sent them our cassette tapes. They sent us back sort of cleaned up versions. There's an access version as well as a sort of master file version with all the metadata that they had for the digital files in an Excel spreadsheet. And we then uploaded all of our metadata as well as the oral history, the digital files to Omeka. While those tapes were away, we knew who all the interviewees were. So that's when we gathered and digitized the photos for each sister and did a brief biography. So we were able to do that exhibit metadata creation while we were waiting for the tapes. And I believe it took, it took several months for us to get those back, but we still retain the physical tapes as well. So I will just share, I am now on the grant review committee for that project. It is an incredibly wonderful program, and they are always looking for small institutions with recordings at risk. there are a lot of larger institutions that apply for these grants, but they are always looking for small institutions. So I would encourage you, if you have a great collection of recordings of some kind, at-risk media, please apply because it's a great program.
All right, the next question I see is for Lucy. How did your community come to the decision to share a publication with challenging language or imagery?
I'll be honest, I don't think any of us thought of that until we were already in the project. Like I said, the main considerations were that because they had, like I said, because they had already been published, they had gone through the PR department at the time when they were made. So we all felt that meant that they had been acceptable for public consumption at the time. And there shouldn't be any legal issues. So or privacy issues, or like issues with the art or the photographs inside. So that was mostly what we were thinking about at the time. And then as I was going through and scanning and noticing some of the articles, I started realizing that there were some problematic components. And then I did contact the leadership team. I wrote them a little memo, and we all agreed that just because these things are painful now or upsetting doesn't mean that we wanted to cover them up or pretend that they didn't happen, especially since some of these things were just accepted terminology at the time. We didn't want to pretend that they didn't happen. And thankfully I went to a liberal arts college, so I was really prepared to write a warning for the cases where we had to.
Okay, thank you. At the moment, that does it for the questions in the chat, although you're invited to continue to send those in. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that there are several links in there to some of the resources that these sisters, sorry, I'm so used to sisters, that these women have been talking about. So you can continue to send in questions or raise your hand with any additional questions.
I have a question. I have questions.
Go ahead.
Sorry. And I wrote them, I'm sorry, Veronica, I wrote them directly to you. I wasn't quite sure how we were supposed to be doing all that. But let me put my video on, sorry. I think it works. Yeah, hi. So really they were for Veronica and things that occurred to me while you all were talking. So I think Veronica and Casey, you kind of work together, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so, and it just seemed to me that for me, it's hard because I've started slowly setting up, content delivery on different sites. And you all had so many sites out there delivering your content. And I thought, I wonder if that can be challenging. Like, what do we put where? And do you have a goal to sort of consolidate it down at some point? And, that feels like a big job too. And so just your opinion on that. And then also because there was a content DM, and I know usually that's, university that can pay for that. Certainly I haven't known really many women religious organizations that can afford to pay for that. And so it sounds like the congregation is piggybacking on that content DM site for the university. That was a question. And also for the grant you were talking about, Veronica, were there requirements for the audio visual for deliverables that, sometimes they say, well, this has to be made publicly available, and were yours just internally available, or did you put anything that you digitized as a result of the grant on a World Wide Web kind of site? Those are my questions.
So for the video content from the Vincentian sisters, they did ask for videos to be fully accessible, and I did put a caveat in the application that we would have a review process with former Vincentian sisters where they look at, once we got the digitized copies back, look through and make sure they were comfortable with sharing these videos, because they were very much home movies. I mean, these weren't professionally done films. I mean, they're very amateur. But so we had no idea what was on them because most of them weren't even labeled. So that kind of gave me a little bit of leeway, and I did put that in. And I'd say especially for clear grants, they are very much sensitive. If you have culture or something you really don't want to share, you can, as Casey shared, just share the metadata. They want to make sure
okay.
the metadata is at least publicly available, but if the record itself is something that you're not as comfortable with sharing, they do make some, they have some opportunities.
Allowances, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't think of the word. And then for Content DM, that's our Ohio Memory through the Ohio Historical Society, which apparently is like next door to Content or OCDC. OCLC. Yeah, they're like less than a mile from each other. So that's why our local our state historical society uses it. I think that's pretty rare. But that's where the $250 a year cost comes in, I'm sure. It's just, for every partner within Ohio Memory, it's the Content DM cost.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll speak to the sort of like multiple sites things. Yes, it's a pain in the rear, to be frank, to have the multiple sites. But I think in our case, we've got our congregational site that we have, and then we've got the Federation, which is really more of a collaborative exhibit-based site, and then our university, which the plan for our congregation is sometime in the future that the community's archive will go to our university. So very likely the university itself, and I'm the current archivist, so I imagine I myself will be managing that underneath the guise of the university. And so as we make changes and decisions at the university level, and as I manage both collections, I'm kind of keeping that in mind, because that's sort of what our future looks like. But yeah, it's not always ideal. And I will say, like, some of it is just the Omeka site that we have that's congregational is sort of a result of experimentation too, because we used to have the free like omeka.net site that we used initially, and then we decided, no, we need to upgrade. We needed more storage space. We want to do a little more. So there's been various iterations over time.
Thank you.
So I have another question here, and Donna, maybe you can help me put this into context. So this is one that you had sent Veronica. So your question is, are we basically talking about Dublin Core? Did the grant require publicly accessible video as one of the deliverables?
Yeah.
So I guess a bit about who was that directed to, and do you remember what that was about?
Yes, it was to Veronica, and she just answered about the publicly deliverable audiovisual. But yeah, then I saw your metadata format, and it looked like just basically Dublin Core.
I think that's what they use generally, because that's what I've also had experience with the University of Cincinnati, their library catalog, as well as I'm pretty sure their digital repository, which at the time was Hydra, I think, and they might now be on Content DM. They switched since I've been there, but it seemed like Dublin Core was what they used for their metadata.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And I just want to make a general comment. The thing that and this is sort of related to the multiple platforms question. I think we all need to get comfortable with the fact that whether it's a CMS or it's something like where you put your finding aids, or whether it's an exhibit platform, guess what? Every 5 to 10 years, they update these things, or someone doesn't like it and you're going to switch anyway. So, I mean, that's sort of the unfortunate fact is, you kind of get right into the swing of things with something like a software or a platform, and then suddenly it's outdated, or there's something brand new that looks better, or your leadership decides that this isn't what we want. And so, I mean, my thing is like, you have to be flexible, you have to be willing to learn, and try new things too. So I think that's important.
Yes. And we have another one that came in recently. For projects with sisters who are still living, is it best practice to check with them before using their material for projects?
Well, I guess I do want me to start on that. So for the Sisters of Charity Federation oral history exhibit, we had initially started that project with the idea that it would only be deceased sister stories. But then we learned that some of our Federation communities had not created an oral history program until relatively recently, or really started a program because of this project, which was kind of encouraging. So then we did have to branch out to think, okay, we are putting living sister, and there are some included in the collection. So at least in terms of what we did with my community is I did send a list of all of, including our deceased sister, but all of the interviews. And I did highlight, we had Sister Ruth Ann Rohde was our representative from the Vincentian Sisters of Charity. So I did say that, she's still living, and do we feel comfortable with sharing? And we did have release forms, especially for Sister Ruth Ann's, because hers was done recently. I wouldn't say we always had release forms, unlike Casey. That was really encouraging to hear. But with a modern program from the mid 2000s up, we do have release forms. So at least we did have something in writing. But that's kind of the process we went through. We did check with both leadership and the sister.
Yeah, we do. Well, I'll just share. So we've had an oral history program since 1982, and our sisters started an official program. A sister was in charge of it. They've signed release forms. They were all very obedient and said, yes, do whatever you want with my oral history, which maybe that wasn't their best decision, but they all signed the release forms. And so we were very lucky in that sense. But if we do upload content, like some of our exhibits, for example, that become more contemporary, we try to get permission from the sisters to, first off, include them in whatever way we're including them, whether it's a photo or a quote or a snippet of an oral history or something. We do try to get their permission, at the very least verbal. If it's something that's more extensive and formal, we'd probably get their written permission. I didn't show this, but when our university celebrated 100 years, we did a digital exhibit, and a lot of our sisters were living, and we wanted to include a photo and a brief biography of each of them. So we did reach out and get their permission to do that. So I think it's a great courtesy to do that, so that they're not getting phone calls like, I saw you on the internet, and people saying that they know information about them. But I have said, my experience is they've always been very open and encouraged by the work that we're doing. So we've had very little pushback on those kinds of things. So.
Yes, Veronica.
And I did just want to add that this question gave me the thought. One of the major projects that we focused on in the last year was digitizing the entire photograph and slide collection from the Vincentian Sisters of Charity, because that collection will be going with the Women Religious Archives Collaborative in Cleveland. So the idea for that was, well, how much can we share and have more immediate access to if needed going forward? But also, like, once it gets there, we hardly know that much about their history, because by the time they joined, I think maybe they had 25 or 30 sisters. So it was always a small community. So it was challenging from our end. So to try to provide as much context as history as we could for the collection. So I had that thought that, I know a lot of communities are in that process of transition, and digital collections might not be an option. You might have a lot of other processing and more immediate needs to get the collection ready. But I would say the digital component, if you do have the time and ability, it's going to be very helpful in the long run. So something to think about there.
Okay, and we'll continue to take your questions, but I have one of my own. Is there a way to track how many people view certain items or collections? And if so, I'm trying to understand the question. Does that influence research decisions, so data decisions that you make in terms of what to digitize in the future, or in terms of supporting the funding of a digital platform?
So I think it's a little bit more challenging now, but Google has some free statistics that you can pull up for any website, because we've done that sometime for our listserv with ACWR. I used to put kind of a graph together in the newsletter to show, what was our hottest post of the year or whatever. I think it doesn't have the graph component now. It's like, here's the raw data, but there is that option. But for Ohio Memory, I guess it's through the Content DM system, they provide quarterly reports about usage, and it's very interesting. They actually break it down by country, city, did they visit, how long did they visit overall, our web page, and as well as specific sites. So it's a very detailed report. I want to say it's like 15 different sections that they break it down. It's pretty long, but and it's interesting, it changes quite a bit. For a while, one of the sisters' investiture ceremonies from the Vincentian Film Collection, especially during COVID, that seemed to be the number one video for a bit. But before that, it was, I want to say, the Good Sam, the Civil War patient ledger with the Union and Confederate soldiers treated from the Battle of Shiloh. That's always been a highlight. So yeah, it does help. And I would say I received a state grant for most of the projects that we use, and I was able to put that in the application. Like, here's from our previous project, we had this many views, it's been seen from all these different places. And it does seem to help. I mean, we've received that grant like 4 times now, so.
Yeah, I'll just follow up with Veronica's comments. For the Omeka sites, if you have your own URL and you have a backend you can access, you absolutely can see some of that data. And exactly as Veronica describes, it'll tell you how many page clicks or how many views per page or even per item. You can look at that at that level. You can look at the graphs and it shows you all over the world. I sometimes find those statistics not as useful because I think like there are random things that influence that, right? Like, oh, I just randomly got on this page and stuff like that. What I find much more useful is the fact that particularly on Omeka, we have a comment option. So anybody who goes to the site can click on an item or a document or whatever it happens to be, a photograph, and they can comment on it. Now, we field the comments because you can get like bots that post weird things. We field all the comments and improve them. But I find that the feedback we get and the commenting we get on individual items is much more telling. So the oral histories, for example, have been exceedingly popular. And that is because it is people, I don't know what compels them to Google their favorite teacher from 3rd grade or their great aunt, and they suddenly come across our site and they go, oh my gosh, I haven't heard her voice in 50 years. This is incredible. Like those kind of comments, or, the photographs in particular, audio visual stuff is of most interest to people, I find, and is most requested for us to digitize, of course, too. So, when people say, wow, like, that is my relative, or that is my teacher, or that is my colleague that I worked with at the hospital, 35 years ago, like those kinds of things are the feedback that I tend to connect with the most. And also then that feeds into what we do. We have a good sense too, based on our inquiries that we get to the archive, like what are people most interested in? Like there are very clear sisters and ministries that are sort of more requested or more popular or perhaps more well-known. And so that also feeds into our decision-making when it comes to these kinds of projects. So.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the question was not meant for me, but just in case anyone's curious, the Internet Archive does track views. It doesn't even need to be an item you uploaded. You can see how many times any item has been viewed. Like I said, I'm still, I guess, relatively new to this job, so this is the first big project I've done, but I definitely the views and the data from this project will help if I do it for other ones in the future, where I can say, oh, we got this many views from uploading magazines to the Internet Archive. It is also, I was contacted by Carol Sargent, who is also doing a webinar, I think next week, about the Wikipedia pages of sisters. And it was really helpful because she could cite the magazines that I uploaded to the Internet Archive, so for the Wikipedia page, which made a couple of things a lot easier.
That's an excellent segue. I believe is that next week, June 6th? I want to say it's very early in June, our collaborative webinar with the communicators for women religious, and I believe she's the speaker. So
That is the next one. All right, Meg.
Sorry, muted there. I just wanted to first say thank you. This has been very informative, and I always get all these crazy ideas what projects to start with next. One thing I did want to say, I had one question for Veronica, but I wanted to make a comment on the last one. I'm knee deep into a project where we are interviewing our living sisters who are artists, because we wanted to capture their voices while they are living. And we of course have their permission. We wanted them to participate, so they feel like they're still actively showing us their work. But in addition to that, I worked with my communications team first and really thought out, and she's an analytic, nerd. She just loves the analytics, and she, recommended that we try to keep our interviews between 2 and 3 minutes, which is hard to do, but she said the average person doesn't stay longer than 2.5 minutes on the website. So it is good to look at that a little bit. And I think some of ours are 6 minutes at the most, but it did change how we were doing our projects. So that being said, Veronica, you mentioned digitalization of photographs, which is a nightmare I know I need to dive into. When you're doing a big project like that, are you very particular about the photographs that you're digitizing? Do you kind of go, well, I can't really see this well, or it's a terrible picture, and do you get rid of some of them that just are not good quality?
well, I wish we had. That's that's how we'll jump into this. But what I did select was so we did one major photograph digitization project that was grant funded through the state grant that I mentioned earlier. And that one I really looked at, what are our Ohio institutions, because it is an Ohio focused. But then also other ones that we've had a lot of interest in, or that I knew was going to be celebrating a major anniversary and had reached out. And it's like, well, this is an opportunity to get all of their photos digitized and shareable. But so we had a sister who was the photo archivist for like 25 years. She created a database. She has a photo binder. Each photo supposedly has a number, and each mission has its own number. So it's like 0.001 for St. Joseph Hospital, and then 0.001 after that for the picture, and so on and so on. So she had specific counts for all of the collections. She's like, okay, for St. Joseph Hospital, we've got 300 photos. So I'm like, okay, great. But then once the boxes actually got to the vendor, the Crowley company, they hit the what we had thought was our maximum, like our whole project, like halfway through. Like halfway through the stuff, and they're like, we're already at what you said was going to be here. And I'm like, oh, great. So I just would say that that's a big part, really figuring out what your count is. So with the second project with the Vincentian sisters, I went through the boxes and made sure, I'm like, okay, this is and we were pretty much on par with that one. But it was a real steep learning curve that first time. I was like, geez, I did not realize that. And then another thing was, within that envelope, she only pictured on her photo binder like one picture. And you're like, okay, that's the one that's in there. But no, there was like 4 copies of that picture, or maybe different sizes of it, or it's like cut off and this and that. And they scanned all of them. So that was another part why the number was so high. I was like, oh man. So yes, you definitely want to go through, and if you have somebody who put a very specific detailed system in place, like maybe don't trust it 100%, like before you go into a project like that. But yeah, definitely look at ones of your most significant institutions, ones that you get a lot of requests about. For us, of course, it would be our orphanages. That we were mindful. We did only share pictures up to, I believe, the early 50s, where it was like a 70-year time cutoff. And of course, we weren't involved with any native boarding schools or orphanages, so there wasn't that piece to also contend with. But yeah, just think about what's people are most asking for, and then also what kind of fits the grant too, if you're looking at a grant.
Thank you.
So this sort of was addressed with some of the grant conversation, but how are you promoting your collections, letting people know about them, and are they easily found?
So I know I'll speak to first our congregational site. Obviously, when we received the grant, there were some promotional things released about that. So we certainly, before we even started the project, there was some promotional stuff about that. And then when we finished it, we put our own out. We also locally had interest in that project. So we had a press release, we had a local article done about the oral history digitization project. It sparked interest in our archives in general, which was great to see. In terms of our federation, again, particularly the oral history one project that we did, that was featured on Global Sisters Report at one point in time. We put out an official press release through our federation because it was a collaborative federation project. So we've been able to draw attention to the site in those sort of more formal ways, but obviously, you know, in simple ways too. So just like I include like the links to the sites in my email signature, or like, you know, when people are asking about stuff, researchers or others, I'll say, oh, check out more here. You know, I'll send the link to the site. You know, and they have been, some of the links to our sites have been picked up in other places as well. I know we've gotten traffic from some of these other places as well. So any opportunity we have to share it, we try to. And anytime we have a new project, we try to shout it from the rooftops. So grassroots approach is probably our the name of the game, but it seems to work. So that's great.
Yep, ditto. Pretty much. I was just local historical society. I did a webinar with our local historical society about some of our, we had an academy where we had graduate photographs and yearbooks. So I shared about that, and we saw quite an uptick in interest in views. When I digitized all the Vincentian photographs this past year, I was surprised. I thought we had a collection. The community operated a high school on the grounds of the Mother House for about 20 years, from the 60s to the 80s. And I was like, well, of course we have an archival collection for that, but we really didn't. It was more about the closing and then transition to Light of Hearts Villa, which is like housing for the elderly. You know, kind of one of those, like a retirement facility is what it is currently. But we didn't really have anything physically for this high school. And so I called the diocese. I'm like, did you guys get anything? And they're like, no. So there really isn't anything out there. So she recommended I talk to, they have an alumni society on Facebook. So I sent them, I said, you know, here's specific links to all of the Lumen Cordium pictures. And boy, they were just endlessly thankful and had, you know, a bunch of questions. And I'm like, I can't answer them. I don't know anything about the school, but you know, I'm happy to, at least we can provide the pictures. So yeah, definitely grassroots. Yeah, that's the core there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about the same for me. I put them in every newsletter. I put a notice in every newsletter I could find. And I submitted a little blurb for the Merrick, was it the Mid-Atlantic Archivist, through my regional consortium, whatever that's called. And I also told everybody who I'm friends with. But it also helps the Internet Archive. One of the reasons I chose it was I know that people are doing research on there. So it just makes it more likely for if someone's doing a keyword search. If someone's doing research on the Internet Archive, they can find us pretty easily. And since there's a couple articles linked to the Wikipedia page I was talking about, people can find it through there, though I think that's probably less likely that people are specifically researching this one woman and then want to read a random article, but could happen. And then, yeah, like Casey was saying, anytime I get a request of a question about anything, I send them a relevant article, that kind of thing.
Nice. And my last question, how do you ensure fixity of the files, that nothing will get changed? And what are your long-term preservation plans for this?
Casey, do you want to take that one?
Oh man, you stuck me with the hard one. So I'll just say that particularly on sites like Omeka, that is something you have to be aware of. And it's not so much the files themselves, it is quite literally just the software. It is making sure that things are updated on the back end. So that again, this is only, those files are only, I guess at this point, 7 years old, or have been there for, some of them have been there for 7 years. So that's not so much a concern yet. But again, this is why I made that comment about, things are going to change in 5 years, things are going to change in 10 years, because the accepted standards are going to change. Now, internally, the things that we've had digitized, and I'll speak specifically to the oral history files, because those were the ones that we have many of, and we have the access files and we have the master files. The NEDCC who reformatted those for us gave us sort of a workflow to make sure that that the fixity checks are done every so often. And so we can use a program called Baggit just to be sure and to keep up to date with those. Now, you don't have to do it so often. I mean, once a year is reasonable. It's not like you have to keep checking them every month. But when it comes to uploading things on a site, you just have to be very, very careful about that. I've come across several times where, for whatever reason, either on the Federation site or on our own, like I'll click on something that I expect to be there and it's suddenly not there. And again, it's not that the file, there's something wrong with the file itself. There's something wrong with, I don't know, the website, the software, the connection, the coding. I mean, there's a million things between the file and what you see that could go wrong. So often it's issues like that. Or sometimes it's like the server's down, right? So like if either your internal server or if you're hosted by somebody else, like there's an issue with the server. So I've run into more issues related to that in terms of these digital collections than anything. In terms of like our either born digital or digitized content like photos, we're not at that level. And I think most of us are not at that level yet, to be honest. I just think like that's something I don't even want to think about, but I know I need to think about it. I'm just trying to get a grip on things for the moment. So go ahead, Veronica, your turn.
I'd say just internally, we have things stored on external hard drives. That's one of our backups. And then I work with iDrive, I believe is the company. It's a cloud server, which does have some level of security, because I know there's concerns about cloud servers, but this one was recommended by our IT staff as kind of more long-term as a secondary preservation storage option. So that's what we're doing, at least, for loss, like, that. But in terms of like updating and checking on them, oh no, I don't really do any of that. I mean, I know I should, but I don't know. It was hard enough just getting them up there. But for Ohio Memory, right now their stance is that even if we backed out this year and we didn't pay our $250, that they will continue to host any of the material that is currently in the system. How long that is, it's not like we got anything in writing, so, but at least there's at least that piece. Just to be concerned long term, like our Ohio State, we had a library system that had if you saw the finding aid I shared, that was just the text that I had links to. That is going away in June. And it's been around for over 20 years, but the system is 20 years old. They're like, well, nobody uses that. Everyone uses archive space now. And it's like, well, we don't. Like, I can't spend $4,000 just to put finding aids together. Like, that's crazy. So that's been a whole project. They're going to host them through 2029. So those links will still be viable. And then we have with our Sister of Charity Federation, we are archiving our websites. It's through archive-it. I would definitely look into that. It's really great service where you're, even if you just run a crawl, they have a free crawl option where you can type in a link and run at least one crawl that they'll save. But looking into potentially a subscription, it is pretty costly, but for us, at least, we're preserving the digital presence of the community, which is a big part of what records are generated now for the community's history and ministries. But the other piece too is this preservation of our archival work. So we're going to be preserving all those finding aids through our archive at site. So at least they'll be there, you know, and I can link to that site going forward if the 2029 thing doesn't actually happen. So, yeah.
And Archive It is through the internet, or it's like partner with the Internet Archive as well.
I believe so. It's the
Yeah.
Wayback Machine. Yep, it's all
Yeah.
connected. Mhm.
Yeah. That's really interesting about Ohio Memory because I looked into the PA, the Pennsylvania equivalent, and I was told that if you stop paying the yearly due, then your material is taken off. Um, so
It's understandable because that's the
yeah,
cost is the hosting. But
yeah.
I will say I used to work with the University of Cincinnati for one of their medical history library, basically. And they put stuff up like 12 years ago and stopped. They stopped before I was there in 2014, and that's still up there. I mean, you can still look at what they have for now, but you know, again, I don't know how long it'll be.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about my project is that because it is not a preservation project, it's an accessibility, it's to increase accessibility. I don't, I am not as worried about the preservation aspect, and then also because everything is uploaded to the Internet Archive, which I am in no way affiliated with. It's all their problem. It's not my, I don't have to think about it. I do have master copies of all of the issues I scanned in, which pretty much the same situation as everybody else. They were backed up to a server, and I'm just, you know, shelving that for a later date of for in terms of fixity. Yeah, and we have the physical copies still, so for me that's not as much of an issue. And theoretically, you know, people can download the issues off the Internet Archive, so if something horrible happened, maybe in the future you could reach out and say, does anybody have a copy that I can have back?
Yeah, I think Veronica, you bring up a great point though, and that I think we all as archivists know this and recognize this is that thing just because it's digital doesn't mean it's going to last. So in a lot of these cases with these special projects that all of us have presented on today, you know, if you pay in, and I think the Internet Archive is maybe a little different, they've had some great longevity, but if you're paying into something, if you stop paying, doesn't mean it's going to be there, right? So I think that that's a concern. Or, I mean, in the case of Ohio Memory, even, I mean, you know, they're only, if you stop paying, they might keep it up, but if there's no infrastructure to keep that going, then it won't be there. So I think that that's why we keep all the physical stuff, because we can't guarantee that the digital will even be there or someone can pay for it. Unfortunately, we're not in an era where, you know, everything's like this is free, that there's just, you know, a plethora of digital storage space available for everybody's needs. No, it's a paid model, and that's part of the challenge, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and not to sound like I'm shilling for the Internet Archive, but that is one of the reasons I chose it because they, like Casey says, they have longevity, they have a ton of infrastructure, they're very committed to making all of this available for as long as possible, free to everybody. Though I will say the downside to that is anything you upload becomes public domain. You can they have options for Creative Commons licenses, which is what we used. I used a non-commercial share alike, I think. So you can keep it, you can download it, but you cannot sell it for profit. If you do anything with the files, you can't sell it for profit. So, but yeah, so.
Maybe I'm paranoid, but I think that we can't, any website, even the Internet Archive, we have to be wary of it. It's not, we cannot see it as forever. We have to take steps to think through about, you know, preservation at some point in some way. That's just me, sorry.
Yes, Meg.
This conversation, I think, will be very fascinating going forward as congregations are looking at merging and how we have our things saved on all these different platforms, you know, if they will merge and how they will merge and how that moves forward in the future.
Well, I want to thank our panelists and our participants and our audience. I think this was a profitable afternoon. And I hope you have a good day. Our next webinar is next week on June 6th. Generally it's about Catholic Sisters publishing in different ways. And it's done with CWR. So thanks again and have a good day.